Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today is Friday, and usually I do something about racing, but I'm going to mix it up a little bit this time just because, well, the truck's not done. Waiting for the headers to come back, so I can't do a lot of racing. So today's videos will be more of a tech-oriented one, although this one does involve the heads that will be on the next engine that's going on the S10, and that's those. Today's one's about which one is better, whether it be an oval port or rectangular port, or pretty much comparing heads. We can just call it that. I'm going to compare two different sets of small block Chevy heads, and I know someone's going to be like, why don't you do others? These are just kind of what's here. If you ever wonder why I come up with topics to do for videos, a lot of it comes from customers input one, or customer stuff that's sent in. Also comments on these videos as well. This just happens to be one I thought maybe you guys might be interested in, because it's going to give you some information about what happens when you have two heads that flow the same. Which one is better or worse? So first off, let's talk about what each one of these heads are, then we'll talk about the flow numbers that they have, and we'll go through some of the differences, and I've got velocities and a whole lot of data and things you probably never even thought of. Let's get started with this one. This is for the new engine for the S10. This is a set of Brodix small block Chevy headhunter heads. Now, these are a raised runner head, so they're up, and it's also a oval design as far as the intake port. Now, these, just to give you an idea, I want you to make sure you understand, this is a CNC ported in a way. I actually had them CNC port them, but I told them to make it 30 thousandths smaller than the 225cc intake port that they have. I was hoping to save myself some time. I'll show you the underside here in a minute. And I did because also not only does it save me time, I wanted to be able to put the ports where I want. This one is completely done, and that's the one I flowed. That's this head. It has a 215 intake valve, a 1/600 exhaust valve. It is 40-60 valve spacing, which means the intake is moved over 40 thousandths and the exhaust moved over 60. This one has a standard exhaust pattern, which I can show you. As you can tell, it's been ported, that one. That's how they are stock. You can tell they're a little bit smaller. Okay. Now, for the other head that we're compared against, this is the one from the video that happened on Wednesday. This is my Brodix Dragon Slayer that I do. It's my 255cc version. It is 255 cc's, obviously. It's standard valve spacing, which means it's in the same location that most other heads are, like Dart and a few others. Anyway, it has a 214 intake valve and a 1560 exhaust valve, and it's a standard port height, and it's also rectangular. Now, I've flowed both of these on both my benches, both the Sanyas and the Superflow, and I'm gonna go through some of the numbers. But first, let me show you the undersides, just so you can kind of get an idea what each one looks like, and I'll try to explain what I've done. And trust me, I'm giving you way more information than you think. So be patient as I go through this. I'm gonna flip around and show you the underneath of each one. Okay, this is the chamber side for the headhunters. So just to give you an idea of how different it looks. This one has not been done. So this one has been done. So you can see how much has changed. Now, the Daikin kind of hides this, but these chambers have been softened. You can kind of see, and what that means is this is done in a CNC machine. I don't do it, I send it off. But it's cut at an angle, so it tapers. So it goes from here and then it comes out. So it's deeper here, then it cones out. The reason for this one is this next engine for the S10 is going to have the TorqueStorm supercharger on it, and this reduces the quench, or not reduces, increases the quench or the flame travel in this area, and it's supposed to help reduce detonation and stuff. So for power outages, it's probably a better deal, hence it's on. The chamber size is actually very large. These measure in now at 79 cc's completely finished out. So they're a much larger chamber than this one. Okay, so that's the chamber, so you can get an idea what you're looking at. You can see this one's CNC ported versus the done version. Now I am going to show you something else that's kind of different. Let me roll my light over there. Okay, let me get my pointer here. I want to show you this because it needs to be said. This is the head bolt hole on the Dragon Slayers. Now this is different. See that step there? That's because there's a 3/8 stud that goes through here. These take 7/16. This one in between, so just these two on this head, are a 3/8 stud. It still goes in your block just like normal. Those are shoulder and a special stud that goes through there. The reason for it is because because the stud's smaller, there's more material here, and so I can push the wall over without breaking through, which I don't know if you could see well because the camera may not capture it, but right there, it's starting to blister. And I can't show you well. I like to, but I'll try. Sorry about the movement of the camera. I know people hate that. Look in that head bolt hole, hopefully. The light, where are you? There you go. Oh, it's not gonna work for me. I'm not gonna get a chance. But anyway, there's a blister in there. What I mean is, I'm gonna flip it back. Sorry, guys. Give me a second. Okay. What I mean by that is, and you can see it right there, just barely. It hasn't broke through yet, but right there. You see how it's divoted in? That's where the head bolt hole is. That's actually how I'm gonna leave it. This is for my own, so I'm not really worried. It's thin there, but not super thin. So on the next one, I'm trying to get me more material on this side so I don't have an air leak so much. But typically on the 3/8 ones, I actually don't even sleeve them if I do break through because the stud sits so much tighter than the 7/16 versions. Now, why am I telling you this? Because this head doesn't have that. I opened it up so much that it broke through and then I put a sleeve through, okay? This is the side for the Dragon Slayer so you can see it, okay? I want you to see how much the difference is as far as size-wise. Look how big it is here compared to there. This still looks big, but it's not. This bowl is much smaller. I should probably point that out. The bowl is from here across the guide is much smaller than that. Much smaller, okay? So there's that view, so hopefully you get an idea. Now I'll go ahead and spare you the drama, but the exhaust ports are exactly the same. Well, this one's actually smaller, I'm sorry. And the reason why it's smaller is, whenever you get the Headhunters, they have a helicoil on the exhaust, which is great. But because they're a bigger tap whenever you put in the helicoil, I typically don't push these out as far because you're more than likely to get into where they put the helicoil. But on these ones, I don't have to worry about that because they're not helicoiled. So there's more material there and I feel more comfortable. You're like, well, you got plenty of room. Looks like you got a bunch, but it tapers that way. Okay. All right. So you're like, fantastic. That's great. You showed me the head. Where's this information you want to talk about? Well, let me stop the camera and I'll flip it around. I want to show you the flow sheets and I'll tell you the sizes and a whole bunch of weird stuff about comparing the two heads. Because I'm going to go ahead and tell you, here's your little preview. These heads flow really close to the same. Okay, here is the flow numbers for each head. So this is my Headhunter. That's the Dragon Slayer. Flow numbers for the Headhunter and flow numbers for Dragon Slayer. Let me put them closer together so you can compare them easier. Okay, because I want to show you some of the stuff. I'm just going to talk about the flow numbers for just a second, and then I'll go on other stuff. I'm going to look at the intake side first. At 400 on the Headhunters, 252 to 256. So Dragon Slayer is better there, of course. At 600, 318 to 325, Dragon Slayer is much better. Now let's look at peak flow. At 1-inch valve lift, 349, 342. By the way, this is on my Sanyo's bench. I'll show you the super flow later. So as far as flow-wise goes, yes, this is better, but not a whole lot. But peak flow, that one has. Even at 9, it's better. 8, it's not, but it's close. Like I said, they're really close, but we'll get to some more information. Exhaust flow. Now I'll go ahead and spare you the drama. The Headhunters don't flow as good as the Dragon Slayers. Even though this one has a much smaller exhaust valve, so that's a 1.6 versus a 1.560. The peak flow it does, look at this, 251 to 250. That one's the worst, but everywhere else, the Dragon Slayer is better. And like I said, it's because I really couldn't make this one as large, which I'm not as hurt about it. This is for myself anyway. The reason why I'm not so worried about it is because it's only going on a 400 cubic inch engine. So we'll talk about that. But let's talk about this big thing. I wanted to show you this. So, because if I was looking at these two heads and you just saw just the flow numbers and you looked at it and you're like, well, you should get this one, you know, or maybe not. Maybe you should get this one. It flows better. Because a lot of people just advertise the peak flow anyway. This one, like, definitely looks better than that one. I mean, it's oval port and ovals are always better, right? I mean, that's what they say. It's a raised runner. It's better. Well, what I want to tell you, the biggest thing I want to tell you about this is flow is only one part. And this head might be better for a certain application over this one and vice versa. Because this is the major thing that I need to get to. Look at this. I CC'd this head. If you want to guess what the size of the intake ports are, these are 235 cc's. But that looks deceiving because it still seems like that's a pretty big port. but it's raised up. This runner from here, the intake flange, to the valve is longer than the headhunter to the valve. I'm sorry, the Dragon Slayer to the valve. The reason because as you move it up, the port itself has to get longer. So 235 cc's and it's 5.5 inches long. That gives me an average port area of 2.63. In other words, that's tiny. That's really tiny. Here's how tiny it is. That pinch here, that's for those that don't understand this, but this is for LSs and everything else. The pinch would be from here across and here up. That's called your pinch area, and it's all the way here, okay? This pinch area, this is gonna shock you, it's 2.3 square inches. Because of the radius and stuff, that's what it comes out to. That's small. Compare that to this. This one, if I look at my average area, 2.88, much larger than the 2.63. Also, if I could do the area here at the pinch, it's wider. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It's actually the same width. So this width is the same as that width. The height is bigger though, and it doesn't have the radius, and it ends up having a push rod pinch of I think this one's actually 2.82. So, it kind of gives you an idea. If you look at the average is 2.88, the smallest part is 2.82. It doesn't really gain a whole lot as it goes through. And I want to say part of the reason for that is because you got the bulge here takes up area and this takes up area, even though the port itself's growing to make up for that. Now, this dude, 2.3, 2.6 average, kind of strange. I wanted to point that out. Now, why am I saying that? Because if you look strictly off these flow numbers, you would assume that this one should make about the same power as this. It can and it can't. Here's what I mean. If I turn more RPM, let's say I'm only going to 6,000 RPM, this one's probably gonna, let's say it's a 400. I'm going to 6,000 RPM. This one's probably going to make more torque and power. This might actually beat it by maybe a few peak power. But I mean maybe. They're probably going to be pretty close to the same as far as peak power. This one's going to destroy it on torque. Now, take it to 7,000. This thing's done at 6,400. This thing's just keeping on chugging, and it's making probably 20 to 30 more horsepower than that. Even though the flow numbers are so close, you're like, how does it make up that much difference? It doesn't look like the flow number is that difference. It can't make that much more power because it has more area. The area allows the engine to RPM more, and with more RPM, you make more horsepower. So that's a huge thing I want to get to you. Because a lot of you guys just look at flow numbers and never think that the size can have such an advantage. Flow numbers are a small part of it. Because if you looked at just the flow numbers, you would think that they're so close together. But if you turn an engine any RPM, this one's going to destroy that. Destroy it. Low end torque though, that's this. Now you might say, why did you do that then? The 406 that this is going on, I really wanted to make peak power about 6,500, and it's probably going to make about that. This thing's going to try to be a much larger engine. It's going to try to make peak power about 7. So it's a different demand. Not as much demand, way more demand for that. Now let's look at another sheet that gives you something else to compare with. Because I use Performance Trends software for my flow bench, it gives me so many different reports that I can look at to compare different heads and gives me more information that you might find valuable. So this is, again, the Headhunter Dragon Slayer. So these are valve area, which that's because of the valve size itself. It's going to be more than the valve area for this. So you have 215 versus 214. And I'm going to ignore the exhaust to save myself time. If I look at CFM per square inch, that's pretty important. So if I look at this one, it's 98, let's just do peak, 98%, 98.19. This one's 97.07, which means its flow coefficient 2.344 to a 2.394, which means it's moving more air for the size. So this one, even though it's a bigger intake valve, the port itself, because of its size, it's moving more air for its size. And by the way, the only reason why it gets away with this is because it's a raised runner. It helps it a lot. I shouldn't say the only way, it definitely helps. Then you look at flow efficient, and this is valve velocities. Now this is, and port velocities. These are calculated, they're not measured. And I'll get to the measured one in just a second, because I did do the pitot tube on both these. So if I look at my valve velocities, that has a lot to do with the valve size itself. 235.6 at peak compared to 233. So really the air exiting the valve is faster on the Headhunter. If I look at my port velocity, 318.2, 285. This sounds great because you're like, man, you know, they say same port, if I take two heads, the one that flows the most at the smallest makes more power. This has way too much velocity. So like a 285, that's typically what you want to really target if you're trying to make any power on the upper RPMs. This one, I can promise you, it's going to fall off once it hits its peak. It's not going to be able to carry it. The air speeds are just too fast. Even this is calculated. I cannot wait to show you the measured one. But anyway, there's that, and this is the worthless stuff right here. This is your intake to exhaust ratio. It's totally garbage and worth nothing. It's in the 70s. This one's a bit higher. But anyway, let's go on to the next thing to look at. Should be the measured velocities. These are velocity maps, and these are printouts from each head. So again, Headhunter, Dragon Slayer, there's corresponding. Now, this is over the short side. So, which I know the camera's gonna turn. That would be right where the apex is, right here. This here is what's getting mapped. Okay, so you have it here and here. What it does is the colors tell you how fast the speed is, and this is measured. So I use the pitot tube and it maps it out. Okay, so this is the Headhunter. The red being the faster speed. If you look how the red's all the way across, it's pretty uniform, by the way. The raw numbers are somewhere, I didn't get it, forgot to print them out. But I'll go ahead and tell you, it was 370 right here at the apex, 370. So if you look, pretty red all the way through. And then this darker red here, it goes all the way up. Okay, compare that to this head. It's got a yellow spot, that's where the wing was. But this one was also about this is 380 at this, and then 370s on the side. It's much slower as you go up. This keeps the velocities more uniform through the whole port compared to this one. The catch with that is, which I didn't have a map for this, but I measured the velocity at the pinch. So here, the velocity at the pinch was 320 feet per second going in. This one was screaming 380. That's a lot of velocity to have right at the pinch, which you're like, well, then you created a horrible port. Let me go ahead and tell you something. One of the things else that you can deal with the velocities here is, if you want to make a good port, you want to keep the velocities pretty much the same or speeding up as they get to the valve. What you don't want, and the nature of the beast with some of this stuff, especially on this head, what you don't want is it to get fast and slow, or as it goes through the port. So in this case, it goes slow, then it has to pick up, then it's fast, then it's slow as it exits. This one's pretty much uniform fast, because I'm 380 at the pinch. At the short side, I'm 370 and only lost 10. If you compare that to this, it was 320 to go 380. It gained 60. So that's a considerable change in velocity compared to this. The velocity is more uniform. That typically helps prevent fallout. The catch is, it works if the velocity was to make more power in the higher RPM. If the velocity was slower, it's still too fast. So if I keep this and start accelerating as I go towards the valve, it would definitely make more power than as it is. But if, in other words, I also do wish, which you can't do with this just because of the design, but it'd be great if the velocities throughout the port kind of were slow and then picked up some speed as it goes over the short side, and that's about it. Very tough with these. You can't. You have to open it up so it can make the air overturn. It's the nature of the beast. But ideally, in a perfect world, we keep the velocities pretty much steady or increasing towards the valve, just not dramatic jumps, because typically that causes fallout of fuel. Fuel drops out, and you're like, what about fuel injection? Well, most of you have a fuel injector. If your individual ports are spraying right here, same cause. Carburetor, it's going to drop out. Throttle body, drop out. So having the velocity more, I have to say this is probably going to be really good with the AFRs because the velocity is high through the port and it's able to maintain it because of its shape. Usually when the speeds are that high at the pinch and at the, it causes issues where the port will start backing up anyway. This one never backed up. The reason why is because the shape, it helps hold that air attachment, and it doesn't detach on the short side, and things are more normal through the port, and it doesn't have issues. because usually when the speeds are that fast, I can guarantee it usually backs up. Now I did do something else really kind of cool. This map you see, these colors, it's due to the fact that the computer's trying to estimate how the velocities would be to the port. Well, I changed it just to see if it would be different if it was oval or round. They gave me a round one. This is same numbers we're in, but this is what it estimates what the speeds would look like, which is maybe because short sides are really red. That's where the faster speed was, slower here, and maybe faster here because that's where the vein is, where the valve is. And this is it going around. Interesting, maybe. All right, let's go to the next report. This is the next thing that Performance Trends can do on its flowing software. If you enter the engine specs in, it already has its flow numbers now. It can calculate what it thinks your horsepower will be. And that's what I've done. So on the Headhunter here, this is the engine it's going on. So it's gonna have it's a 406. This is exact cam specs, by the way. It's 244, 256, 700 lift, 112 lobe degree separation. And I think I said 9.8 compression ratio. It can estimate my cranking compression is gonna be 160. Tells me what it thinks my auto vacuum is gonna be 12.3. And anyway, what it does is it says, look here, at 5,200, this is where your peak torque is gonna occur. You're gonna have 541 foot-pounds of torque. And then at peak horsepower, it thinks it's gonna happen at 6,500. And it's telling me it's gonna be 598. So just shy of 600. I will say typically these err on the low side. I'm gonna bet this thing does 560 on torque. Well, it might 550 on torque and probably 610 on horsepower. Now look at this one, different engine that it's going on. But this one says its peak torque's gonna occur. This one's going on, by the way, at 434. I guess this cam specs, I'm not sure if this is what he's running, 266, 272. I guess he's gonna be a 700 valve lift and a 108 lobe separation and 11.5 to 1. So this is a guess on what his is. It's really the cam specs. This one says peak torque will occur at 5,400. It's gonna make 613 foot-pounds of torque. Peak horsepower, it's guessing at 6,700 RPM, and it's guessing 697. Now, I actually think this is gonna be higher, but we'll find out because this will be on the dyno, this one will be too. So there's some more information, but I did find one other cool thing they could do. I talked about overlap flow. The computer can actually, because if you enter the cam specs, it already has your flow numbers, it could tell you how much flow happens during it, and that's what this graph is. So it can do other stuff. Last thing, I told you I'd have the flow numbers from the Sanyas, and also from the Superflow. This is the flow numbers for the Superflow. So this is what the Headhunter did on the Superflow bench at 4, 252, 6, 320, peak 351. And by the way, this is stock exhaust. This is the ported exhaust. They went 246 on exhaust. Look at the, if we look at the Dragon Slayer, 265 at 4, much better. 600, 332, much better. Peak 353, only 2 CFM better. So it's weird because on the Sanyas, this one was better at 100, but on the Superflow, this one's better at 100. Exhaust flow, as you could tell, 250, it's actually better than this one. So kind of difference in flow benches. Anyway, guys, thanks for sticking around. I know it was a longer video, but I probably spoke real fast to this. I think this thing's gonna end up being long when I edit it all together. I just don't want to leave out any information. If you guys got questions, feel free to put them in the comments and stuff. I'll try to do my best to answer when I got time, or I'll make another video answering your question. I will do another video on Saturday, and it's not at all related to racing. I got scammed. Sent a helmet off to a guy, and he was supposed to paint it, and he now has my helmet and my money, and I have none of it. But I'm gonna do a little video about that on, I think I'll probably drop it on Saturday. Just because I felt like it, you know what? Just talk about scammers. But it has nothing to do with racing. If you don't want to watch it, it's fine. But anyway, I appreciate you guys sticking around. You guys take care. Have a good evening. I got to get to grinding.